Good morning and welcome to Frontiers of Knowledge segment of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. I was amazed, surprised and shocked when I saw that the economy of Canada is on a bend and not on a positive side. Surprisingly, Canada's surplus trade has become deficit. And that's an ominous sign. The ominous sign that the demand is weakening and the trade balance becomes unexpectedly deficit. And that has been reported recently by Stats Canada, showing thereby that the country's energy products shipped less products amid a drop of prices. So double whammy. Prices drop and then the quantity exported is reduced. Would you believe that the Canadians' basic income is from the trade? Our agriculture produces not much. It's a manufacturing products that get us necessary foreign exchange as well as provide employment. Unfortunately, both these are likely to suffer. And that's a sign which the government should take seriously. The value of the exports recently, as reported by the government body, Stats Canada, dropped by 2.3%. And the imports also dropped 2.1%, meaning thereby our foreign balance of trade has changed, exports have dropped, and also the imports have dropped, and imports drop is less than the export drop. Result: the deficit of $41 million. Not something to sneeze at, especially when we are going to touch trillions as far as our national debt is concerned. And this drop is dangerous. In October, amazingly, just 1 month before this drop, we had a trade surplus of $130 million. And the Bay State was expecting a surplus to widen to $500 million. Instead, what has happened? Wheat has fallen. 8 out of the 11 export categories posted decline. We export 11 major products. Out of those 11 products, 8 have shown a decline. And that decline is reflected in the adverse balance of trade as well as adverse balance of payment. And the maximum decline was in the energy products, which plunged 4.7%. Coal dropped 24.3% in 1 month. Natural gas fell by 13.1%. So coal 24.3% and natural gas 13.1%. Refined petroleum products fell by 7.9%. And crude oil and bitumen declined 1.8%. And then the prices played a significant role. But capital economics has rooted and noted very clearly that the export volume declined 1.4%. And this is the tip of the iceberg. Moreover, it's a sign as it signals weaker demand for exports and an important driver for Canadian economic growth. As I said, Canadian economy minus exports is nearly nil. 90% of our economy is export dependent. We, like Singapore, are export-oriented country. And when the export declines, and our major exports, as I said, are energy products. And energy products across the table, coal, natural gas, refined petroleum products, all have declined. And these low commodity prices, whatever has not declined, has wiped out the previous goods surplus, trade surplus, which was good. The file shows that the fall in exports and imports volume presents downside risk to the preliminary estimate that the GDP would go up. Now, when the exports decline, okay, then the GDP would go down. So we were expecting the growth to be little less than 2%. Now it might be 0 or it might be negative. The surveys very clearly suggest that there is every likelihood that the exports and import volumes will further decline. It's not the end of the road. Actually, we are reaching the edge of an abyss, precipice. We can fall headlong down and there will be no hope. On the other side, we are wasting money in sending free of cost, no charges, huge volumes of arms. And yesterday I also read we are sending the personal transport carriers to Ukraine. We are also going to send people to train the Ukrainians in that. So that's going to add to our cost because we are not getting paid for that. So the Stats Canada's last month forecast, a month-over-month increase in GDP, was 0.1%. And if the trade surplus becomes negative, this 0.1% would become minus 2%, minus 3%. Another sour note. This is not the end. That 6.4% decrease in exports of automotive parts. Now, automotives are the major export. Major export. The whole economy of Ontario, for example, is dependent on auto industry. And there has been 6.4% drop in the export of automotive parts. And this has happened in 3 times in 1 year. 3 times in 1 year there has been a fall, monthly fall. And it's estimated that the international shipments are now 20.4% below pre-pandemic level. So if we look at 20, the beginning of 2019, beginning of 2020, the fall is 20.5%. And this fall is humongous, and that's not possible. And this suggests then setbacks could have more to do with a dump in demand than pandemic disruption. So this fall is not because of the pandemic, because the fall is pre-pandemic. And in pandemic period, we continue to maintain the export potential as usual. However, everything is not dark. Our agriculture shipments, we can export wheat, we can export pulses, and we are exporting millions of dollars worth, increased 7th time in 8 months. Every month there has been an increase. But what happens when the season is over? Wheat and canola have reached new all-time high. Now let's not forget 2 things. A, Ukraine was the biggest exporter of wheat. Now Ukraine exports have come to 0. Because of the war, because of the disruption in supply chain, because of the disruption in harvesting and storing. So at that time, our exports naturally have increased because the world cannot do without wheat. And that increase should not be assumed to be a permanent nature. No wars are ever eternal. They come to an end. Even this war would come to an end. So Ukraine will be back in the field. And then the setback will be humongous because the expectations of the farmers have been built up. That the wheat prices are going up. That the exports are going up. But when the Ukraine is back in the field, and secondly, the other exporters are India and Pakistan. Pakistan has huge floods, thereby destroying the wheat crop. So they are not going to be again eternal. So Pakistan, once it's back in the field, India with a growing wheat capacity, and Ukraine, these three, then what will happen to the Canadian exports? That is something which should be a matter of concern to the government. The conflict in Ukraine has stimulated the demand, but then that, as I said, is not of a permanent nature. The massive increase in exports of agriculture products would not be possible without a particularly good harvest. So two things combined. We had exceptionally good harvest, and the Ukraine was out of the field, out of the picture. Pakistan was out of the picture. Then among the import segment that recorded pullbacks, aircraft and transportation equipment fell 14%. Forestry products and building material fell 6.1%. And consumer goods declined by 5.7%. So all over we have been declining. And then pharmaceutical imports are partly to be blamed for drop in the consumer good imports. But Stats Canada has noted that other consumer goods imports also fell, which is a worrying sign for the domestic demand. Our domestic demand is also decreasing. And now that's a worrying sign. Here we have got to consider why the domestic demand is decreasing. Because of the unemployment going up. People are being sacked. Amazon, for example, has decided to sack 14,000 people. Microsoft, 10,000 people. And a large segment would be here in North America as well. Of course, India and other countries would suffer, but North America is a hub. And if 24,000 people from only two organizations are sacked, naturally the demand for the consumer goods would fall down because the first demand would be housing, food and clothing. So all others go down. And that's a worrying sign, because that will have a cyclical effect. You cannot maintain high standards when the unemployment is high. You cannot say that you are an advanced economy or a powerful country. All the pretensions that we had and all the claims that we had to be able to provide a heaven for the people, that's in danger of being blown to smithereens. Unfortunately, the government has not taken any corrective or remedial measures. Action should have been taken to provide more employment facilities, to give more incentives and stimulus to the industry so that they employ more people, and thus generate employment, which will generate further demand for the goods, and the balance of payment would be positive. But then we have been penny wise, pound foolish. We have been spending money on the useless things, as I said. Now we are getting more refugees, more immigrants. Immigrants coming in would be good, but then what we spend on the immigrants, that's not taken care of. They have to be resettled. What will happen to housing? The prices are falling, yes. But when the people, 1.5 million immigrants have to come, they have to be provided with the basics. So all these things are combining, and we need a rational, pragmatic approach. Unfortunately, our approach is very, very, shall I say, baby steps? Yes. And it's not integrated development. It is a band-aid solution to the issues. Not, sorry, not a real solution. And we need a real solution. Let's hope that something would happen. Thank you.